Okay, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to do 5A. This is Unit 5 on cellular energy. We've already talked about the atoms that make up the four organic compounds for all living things. We've talked about cell organelles. We've talked about how we get material in and out of the cell. And now we're going to talk about the energy that's especially for active transport that's going to actually power the cell. So you can see 5A, ATP, ADP cycle, which is shown right here. We're also going to talk about photosynthesis and cellular respiration equations. So basically what happens inside of a cell is we've got to make ATP. ATP is the energy, it's like the Energizer bunny for cells that allows us to do work. And the way we do that is we actually bring in food. If you're a plant, you bring in your food, you actually make it into glucose, and that glucose goes into here and with the help of some other things gets changed into ATP, and then that goes to your cells and we break off one of the P's, making ADP, and that releases a bunch of energy. So we get ADP and a phosphate, and that goes back up in here and gets re-energized to ATP, just keeps going around. So it's the ATP-ADP cycle, and this is adenosine triphosphate. And you can think of adenosine triphosphate as actually being powered by glucose. C6H12O6, this is the energy that's going to be released in cellular respiration, and it's sort of the currency for all things. And that gets pushed over to here, and that allows us to do work. It's like a charged battery, the Energizer bunny. And examples for this is the things that are needed for cellular transport to actually make things go across the or against the concentration gradient, where there are things inside the cell more than what's in the blood, but the cell still needs more of it, so it actually pulls it in against the concentration gradient. Then once that energy is released, we have ADP and a released free phosphate, and that's happened two extra ones. And that actually is the adenosine diphosphate, ADP, and a free phosphate. And this is the uncharged battery, and you can see the Energizer bunny up here with a IV of an Energizer 9-volt battery to charge it up. And then we'll talk about the high energy molecule. This is ADP, and what you have is you have an adenine, which is where we get the first part, and then you have a sugar ribose, and then we have the 3 phosphates. So I've been actually have shown an analogy of this through another website on YouTube, and what they said was these are like 3 bullies sitting on a bus seat, and they don't get along, they're fighting. This one probably the worst of all of them, and what happens is this one gets bumped out, and then these two can spread out and they can live happily ever after, at least more so. So they've got some energy there, and there's a little bit of energy there. And what I asked my kids to do is to draw this shape. Notice that this is very close to what a nucleotide looks like, except it would have this, and only one of the phosphate groups. And I'll show you that. So this is adenosine triphosphate. This is adenosine that's not a diphosphate. But here it says there's a lot of energy here. So if we can actually lyse this through a process called hydrolysis, and we can actually kick that out and release a whole bunch of energy that the cell can utilize. We could use some more energy to break this bond to get some more energy, but it pretty much actually is a no net increase. And then we could hydrolyze this one and get a little bit more energy, but this one really is the big money maker. And then so here's ADP and the Energizer bunny with fully charged battery, and then we hydrolyze that one off, making a free phosphate and ADP, the partially charged battery, and you can see the sort of tired Energizer bunny. So we've got ATP, 3 phosphates, ADP, 2 phosphates, and here is AMP, adenosine monophosphate, which is a nucleotide, and you can see the individual phosphate right there. And remember, they want to be bonded, and in this case it wants to be bonded 5 with 5 bonds, 2 with this oxygen, 1 with that, 1 with that, and 1 with that. So if we actually break that away, we can actually put another phosphate. This is what we normally put on there when we do dehydration synthesis, is we put a hydroxyl ion on the outside, but then we can break that by bringing in a water, which will actually pop that off, and then we can put 2 more phosphates on there to make ATP. Okay, the last slide for 5A is talking about the equations for photosynthesis and cellular respiration. I'm going to put those in here, but let's talk about photosynthesis for a second. Even in elementary school, you realize that sunlight for photosynthesis comes in, as well as carbon dioxide from the air and water up through the roots and the stem of the plant, and then somehow, magically, that gets made up into carbohydrates and oxygen. So, who can do this? These are autotrophs, also called producers. These are things that can make their own food. Plants make the food for all living things. Autotrophs actually make the food, and then us, a consumer, we actually steal it from the autotrophs. So we need to benefit from that glucose also, because that's the currency for living things. So, chlorophyll is the key. So what basically happens is we get energy from light going in, and that energy actually takes these two molecules and changes them into these two molecules. Now, normally what we do is we say it's CO2 plus H2O equals carbohydrates and oxygen with the addition of sunlight, but that doesn't really work all that well. What we need is something called stoichiometry, and we got to figure out how many carbon dioxides do we need to make carbohydrates and how many waters do we need to make carbohydrates and oxygen. So the way the equation is set up, it's not just CO2 plus water plus sunlight equals carbohydrates and water. It's actually 6 CO2, 6 waters plus sunlight equals one monomer of glucose and 6 oxygens to be released. And the way it works out is to make this sugar, I need 6 carbons. So you go over here to this carbon dioxide, you put a 6 in front of it, and you got your 6 carbons. You need 12 hydrogens, and if you go over here, you've got 2 H's, so if you take 6 of those, you have 12. You need 6 oxygens. There are the 6 oxygens right there, and now we need 12 more oxygens, and we can get that from the CO2. So this is a stoichiometry balanced equation where we can actually set it up. Okay, the next thing is cellular respiration, and cellular respiration is set up where plants and animals take in the carbohydrates. Plants make their own carbohydrates. We have to steal it from it when we eat our plants, or when we eat actually organisms that eat plants. And then they have to breathe in oxygen, and with that we can actually release, and these again are autotrophs, these are heterotrophs, these are consumers, because they actually have to consume things. So all life, autotrophs making their own food, heterotrophs having to eat something else to consume the glucose, and then what we actually do is we get the energy released that we got from the sunlight up here as ATP. And then we also breathe out CO2, and we give off water either through our skin or through urine or through feces, but we actually give off water. Now the equation stoichiometry is exactly the same as this. So we have the reactants going in on this side, and we have the products. Down here we take the products of photosynthesis, we take the sugar, and we take oxygen. Sugar we eat, and oxygen we breathe, and we give off carbon dioxide, 6 of them, water, 6 of them, plus a whole bunch of ATP. And we'll talk more about this in 5B. Okay, so that's 5A. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me actually end this show, and hopefully it's nice and short. And go ahead and stop it, and take care.